All right, and we are live.
Cool.
What's up, Gerardo?
Much, man. How are you?
Hanging out. Been doing these not 8 a.m. 8 a.m. podcasts. You
Right, right.
can make an evaluation of our quality here. But I find Zoom, getting on Zoom, right, and just go to the bottom right, go to the dot dot dot, go live on YouTube, connect to a YouTube account, type in the title, go like it just works really easily. Is what I
Yeah,
found.
yeah.
I don't know if that's definitely not, I think, how podcasts are done. Like, you got to have, I don't know, what is it, like Otter, or, you got to have all these different mechanisms to kind of put it out to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all that stuff.
Yeah,
We're just like, hey, we just want to talk to people and record it, you
right.
know?
Podcasting is I mean, depending on the podcast, whether you're doing it live or you're pre-recording everything, it's always a bit of a production because you just never know what's going to happen. Like for example, if your guest is going to be late, you have to figure out like, all right, what am I going to do to fill time until my guest shows up? Or
Mm.
what happens if my equipment just all of a sudden goes out? What's plan B? I'm getting this thing recorded because this is the only time I'm going to get someone, you know, being able to schedule somebody to actually record something. So yeah, podcasting is a production on the backside, but once everything runs smoothly, it's a pretty fun experience.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what I'm waiting for. I don't have any. I should probably be in our program with you,
Mhm.
because that I think that's how I want to do it. Actually, I kind of want to just learn through the process and just get us up and running. Because
Yeah,
I
it's
want I want to have all the good systems. I want it to be accessible on like Spotify, or accessible
mhm.
on Apple Podcasts. Have people be like, oh, you want to promote it. Be like,
Yeah,
hey, check us out on.
yeah, and again, that's all on the backside things, and one of the things that because I do podcasting for and I teach podcasting to a group of high schoolers. I teach it to middle schoolers, and the they learn quickly that all right, there's more than just sitting down and actually, talking. It's like after you've sat down and talked about whatever topic that you're going to discuss, it's like all right, what happens next? Well, now you have to cut up the audio, so your 1 hour podcast is no longer an hour long. Your 1 hour podcast is probably 15 minutes long because
Mm.
there's silences, there's pauses, there's rants that go on that you have to cut out. And then once everything is finished, you realize, wow, that 1 hour of talking was just 15 minutes worth of content.
So I oh man, so I've been running, well, here and there. Some employers, they kind of have some potty mouths,
Yeah,
and we're, a student program,
right.
you know. They fully realize that, parents are watching this, schools are
Mhm.
watching this, teachers are watching this, and then, when someone says something, I have to go, go to the YouTube, browser where it's actually being played, and do a little snapshot, just to see what the timing is, right? Because
Right,
I had to do that with, well, actually, it wasn't a potty mouth. There was an employer sharing too much information about their partnership with Amazon,
right.
and they were under NDA.
Oh, wow.
uh, and so we had to go in there and splice a few things.
Yeah.
But then there's the markers, right? Like, how do you mark certain things? Like when you have a good conversation, like a good interaction with the person that you want to highlight and promote, right?
Mhm.
Like, I don't know how people actually do that yet. I'm assuming people just recognize, oh, this is a good conversation, let's go back 1 minute, mark it as a start, and then wait till it ends, mark it at the end, and then snip that, and then put that into a 30-second clip and put it on whatever Instagram, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if
So
that's.
that's all in the post production. Once you're finished with the podcast, you just go back and listen to it,
Oh,
and
I see.
you just go back and listen to it, and then that's when you start marking everything.
Mm.
And you start, okay, like, oh yeah, this is a good conversation. Let's put this conversation, and you can grab that conversation that you have and kind of rearrange the podcast in whichever way that you want to rearrange it into. So that's the fun part. It's like you're piecing the puzzle together. So like, say for example, we're having this conversation about uh sharing too much information and NDAs. If we wanted to, we could just grab this part of the conversation I put it at the very end of the podcast and talk about like, oh yeah, you probably shouldn't be talking about NDA. You know, if you're under an NDA, you probably shouldn't be talking about certain things. And talking about like, yeah, when you're in the podcast and you know who your audience is, maybe you should, there's a lot of information you can keep out, and watch the things that you're saying so that you're not dropping an F-bomb every other sentence.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's fun. That's the fun part. The post-production of podcasting is really fun. If you're into engineering, and you're into production and things like that, it's fun. For some people, the conversation itself is fun. Like they don't think about like, you know what, I just want to be the mouthpiece. I just want to converse with the person, and then I'll hire somebody else to do the post-production.
Man, if see, that's the thing, like right now, like with PilotCity, like I'm responsible for pretty much everything, right? Whether it be the software development, whether it be the recruiting of the teachers, recruiting the employers, customer support. Like I'm actually doing like a lot of pieces.
Yeah.
And I just wouldn't be able to go back to these podcasts and mark them all, but I could totally see it being interesting if that's what you're doing, and what you're looking for is opportunity snippets, and you're looking to kind of format and creatively design an intro or an outro, or how people have the macros, and they make like a noise or something like that.
Yeah.
Like I think that's something we have to evolve over time, I'm assuming, right? It's like an arsenal of things you start to kind of slip in.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Once you've figured out sort of your niche and what you want, and how you want your podcast to sound, then you can start throwing in, maybe little sounds in there, and you kind of develop an ear of, in music we usually call it like a musical ear, where a lot of people have like a music ear. They can hear melody very well. They can sing back melodies, which I just learned recently that not a lot of people can do. Like a lot of people can't whistle back melodies, and they can't hum back specific melodies. And I was like, oh, really? Like, that's not a thing? It's like, no, it's not a thing. I was talking to my barber about this, and it's like, wow, you can, if you hear a melody, you can sing it back. I was like, yeah, can't everybody do that? Like, how do you memorize a song? It's like, well, I mean, I just kind of just like, it's like, no, but that's something kind of like with podcasting. When you're podcasting, you kind of develop an ear of what sounds good, and like, oh yeah, in the middle of a conversation, like, yeah, that's a pretty interesting conversation. Like, I'm gonna remember that when I start producing something, and then I could slip something in there, like an interesting noise that'll highlight that specific section once I start, the production of this, the post production of it. But
yeah, that's fascinating. There's one student named Ria. She pops up. She's from Berkeley Technology Academy. She just came up to us like maybe a little less than 10 minutes ago, and was like, hey, do you just know that not everyone can imagine? And I was like, what are you talking about? Right. And so she was like, here, look at this image, right? And it's an image of like 8 stars, and like one's like a very definitive like red star, one's a very like fluffy one, one's kind of more vague than that, and just kind of like fades out, right? And she was like, close your eyes. And so we all close our eyes, and she said, okay, now imagine a red star, right? And I can imagine it pretty clear. I'm like, yeah, what about it? And then some people are like, right? And so basically the point she's making is not everyone can imagine something. And it's like a word. It's like anesthesia, I don't know, anesthesia or something like that,
That's
and I feel like that's really kind of interesting that you mentioned, like some people have a musical ear, like they know they heard it exactly, it's memorable, it's ingrained in their thought, in their heart or their feeling or their brain or their whatever, right? They it's recorded, right? And then they can also repeat it, right? So I guess the question is, can people what percentage of people hear good music or hear good noises, right?
Yeah.
And then how many people are able to find it memorable? And then the question is, can other people who find it memorable, how many can reverberate it, and vocally repeat as best they can, right?
Yeah, I do. I honestly wouldn't know that answer. To be honest with you, I'm pretty sure. Like, you have like what 7, 8 billion people on Earth, and not everyone has like access to the same opportunities as everybody else. And some people are born with a musical ability. Like my dad, for example, like he has a perfect pitch. And if you don't know what perfect pitch is, basically like this man who has no musical training whatsoever can play anything that you give him. Like if you, for example, if you play a song for him, a couple of times, he can go out to his accordion and just start playing it. And he
Mm,
has no musical training, none.
wow.
Yeah, I'm like, that's I want that ability. Like, well, how come like a guy who never touched an instrument growing up can all of a sudden just pick up an accordion and start playing what he hears, and I'm over here, you know, 2.5 years of grad school in music grad school, and like I have to listen to it over and over again and play the same 30 seconds just for me to be able to like, you know, memorize a melody and write it out musically just so that I can play it.
And what's interesting is at that point, people can literally understand another tool that can, like I don't know if you listen to I really like this crew, Postmodern Jukebox.
Mm-hmm.
Is that it's called? I don't know if you heard of them, but they do like 1920s covers on modern twists, basically. And they do video, right? So it's
Yeah.
basically a gang of them. It's a squad, and they kind of recycle everyone. The main person who created it, I forgot his name, but he does the piano,
Mm-hmm.
and they just recreate things, and they're able to recreate Blink 182, recreate, like it's just amazing how they're able to recalibrate it into their own tool
Yeah.
and then recreate it and have it be like still pretty freaking dope,
Yeah.
and feel good and be original,
Yeah.
you know?
That comes with a lot of training. Being able to arrange and understand, like, all right, the musical stylings of specific times, because everything changes over the year. Right now we're very into like a very electronic, I would say, like EDM type of sound that you have with pop music. When just like what 10 years ago or like 15 years ago, 20 years ago, in like the early 2000s, you had that very a very pop sound with like In Sync and Backstreet Boys, where it's like, okay, you have these fun little dance melodies, and then all of a sudden you have these cheesy pop ballads and things like
Yeah.
that. And like at the time growing up, like you don't really think about it. It's like, dude, that's really cheesy. At the time, it's like, yeah, this is so interesting. I'm gonna sing this to a girl one day. It's gonna be my wedding song. But yeah,
When you think about like a Britney Spears, right?
yeah.
Like bye stuff, and like, well, I had two older sisters, by the way,
Mhm.
so I'm pretty much a boy band fan,
Yeah.
because I see them and heard them my whole like teenage years, right?
Mhm.
Dancing in front of the living room and all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
It's really interesting in the genres of music that occur over time and how much it sticks, because it's still sticky, right? Like I love when I listen to like and I don't listen to it a lot, but like I listen to an old school song like in the 90s, it's really impactful. Like it feels so good.
Yeah.
Like
No,
I
I
love
agree.
I love it. It feels so
Yeah.
like, yeah, it just feels interesting that we're, I don't know.
No, I agree. Like I stream on Twitch,
mm,
and like my audience tends to be a really young age. Like some of them are in their early, college years, like they're freshmen in college, all the way down to like 14-year-olds. And on Valentine's Day, I was streaming and I decided, like, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna play some love songs from like the 90s. And they were just like, what is this? I've never heard this song before. Oh my gosh, this is really good. It's like, what? You never heard of Boys to Men? You never heard of All for One? Come on. I'm like, what? Where are you guys?
AC and JoJo, man.
Yeah. I was like, dude, what is happening? And yeah,
Yeah.
for me, it's impactful. Like, I'm like, dude, I remember listening to these songs in my headphones with like a burnt CD from Napster and LimeWire or whatever, and putting viruses all over my computer just so I could just download this song, playing it on a
They know the
on a
struggle.
on a CD player from Radio Shack. Like they don't know that, but that was just like wow. It was really impactful for me because I was just listening to them and just like yeah, I remember being in high school and listening to these songs and kind of like doing the cheesy thing where you would write the lyrics out in like a love letter to a girl. I'm like, oh man, I remember those days. And they're just like, what? You have to write letters? It's like, yeah, you used to write letters and you used to go up to people and talk to them. And it's just, and I realized it's like, whoa, like one of the things that I love teaching to my podcasting students is the art of communicating. And I'm like, wow, communicating is such a different thing from when I was growing up in in the early 2000s versus to like how communicating is done now. I'm like, all right, yeah, this is a teaching moment for me that I could work with these youngsters. It's like, all right, I'm gonna game these people up real quick and just tell them how to talk because they don't know. Going
Oh
up to
man.
somebody and asking for a phone number is like a mind blowing to them because we know face to face conversations can be scary to a lot of people.
This is where I start to think, maybe it's maybe it's just not a disconnect. People don't not necessarily understand it. It's maybe we're getting old. Sometimes I think about that.
Yeah.
It's like when you think about people who are older than us, like they went through this with us,
Yeah.
right? And so I guess that's just life, right? We just evolve, right?
Yeah.
Tim Deloney, you are here. Give us an introduction, the mighty Tim.
What's up? I'm Timothy. I did Notes for Notes, I think last summer, 2 summers ago, actually.
Yeah.
And I knew Gerardo before I knew Derek. And he'll mix music and learn.
Yeah. And you're you're a musician, right?
Yeah. He have my guitar behind me.
Give us a beat. Give us something.
Okay.
Give us something. What do you got? Is it on? It must be on. It's always on. If it's Tim, it's always on.
No, it's not. But luckily, I got my cord right here, my cable.
Yeah. You got the Santa Cruz hoodie on.
Yep. It's early in the morning. I'm doing these scales.
Your niece and nephew, your cousins are probably like, come on, man, it's 8:24.
They in class.
We're in school right now. You're being noisy.
I'm trying to learn. Over here playing the ocean.
There you go. Yeah. You got Gerardo in the background, the beach. So this is very, very timely. Tim is the one to introduce us to Gerardo. And so we got all the right people in the house. And Tim, you give us a little story on Notes for Notes. And I'd like to get into Gerardo's story, frankly. I'd like to know how you got here, Gerardo. I mean, you're essentially a nonprofit sound engineering director.
Yeah. I mean,
what's up with that? What was your story? You moved around? I think you're from Vallejo too, right? So
right.
give us some sneak peeks on behind the scenes on you.
Yeah. So, I mean, I grew up in Vallejo, and Vallejo is a pretty musical city. Like it's a really small city, but it's a really musical city when it comes to the things that we've done. Like, for example, we have HER, hers from Vallejo. She actually went to high school with my niece. We have E40 from Vallejo. He was in marching band, and he was in drumline at Hogan High School. Matt Dre was also from Vallejo. And he went to my high school, Vallejo High School. He was actually in marching band with my high school band director. So they knew each other. Again, HR is from Vallejo. And like this little musical city used to be really, really big on music in terms of like marching bands. We used to have huge marching bands here in Vallejo, like 80 to 100 people at one time. And that's where my musical journey started, being like really, really young, second grade, to learn how to play the clarinet, and then just going through all of that. Originally I wasn't going to do music. I went to college for political science. And I thought I was going to be a lawyer until I talked to one of my professors, and he kind of pulled me aside and he was like, "What are your plans after college?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm going to go to law school probably." And he was like, "Don't go to law school." I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Don't go to law school. You don't have the personality to be a lawyer. Like, you're smart, but you just can't do it. Like, I don't think you'd be able to stomach it." I was like, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah, man, you should go do something else." I'm like, "Okay." Because I had a really close relationship with a few of my professors. And yeah, they just told me straight up, it's like, "Don't do it. Just don't do it." I was like, "All right." So after I graduated, I was like, I didn't know what to do. I was like, law school was my plan A to my plan Z. And then I just had a couple friends who was like, "Oh, so what are you gonna do?" I was like, "I don't know." It's like, "Why don't you go, do the music thing?" I was like, maybe. And I just kind of put it off for a year. And then finally, just like, you know what? I'm just going to go. I'm just going to go apply at grad school. I'm just going to go to the Academy of Art. They have a pretty nice program over there. I'm just going to do it. So I did it. And now here I am just doing that. Worked full time as I was going to grad school. And once I saw this position open up on Indeed, I just decided to apply for it. I was like, well, I have nothing to lose. I'm fresh out of school. Let's see what happens. And here I am. And I get to do all the things that I love to do.
So
yeah.
do you regret not going to law school? Is there any form of regret of not going to law school?
None.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah,
that's good then.
like I do not regret it at all. I have a few friends who went to law school, and their personalities are completely different from mine. Like, they're very kind of direct, in your face. They just they don't care. Like, if you say anything, they're just like, they'll call you out on it. And I'm just not that type of person to just be like, or like, you say one thing, then all of a sudden they're just like going into it. Like, whatever you say, word by word, they're going to like get in your face by it. You said and you said mine, and you said, I'm like, oh, that's their personality. So like, I kind of understand why they said that I don't have like the personality to be a lawyer, because I can't kind of be that direct with people.
Why did you want to be a lawyer?
I wanted to make money. That was pretty much it.
Okay. Yep.
The lure of money was the only reason why I wanted to be a lawyer.
Yep.
And yeah, money isn't always should never always be like the reason why you go into a specific type of career. I understand like the lure of money is great, but after doing the whole grad school music thing and being where I'm at now, I kind of realize it's like, I enjoy being happy versus making money. Because when you're in the nonprofit world, you don't make a ton of money, but you enjoy doing what you're doing, and just kind of, you don't really think about it anymore.
Yeah. So growing up, I'd like to kind of break this down, because I think when you're in a population, right, where you're surrounded by everyone who's hustling, right, you essentially are surrounding yourself with a bunch of people who are looking for money, right? And I'm surrounded in the same boat, like I'm from San Leandro, and so it's not like I'm not from the East Bay. And so, and we grew up here in the 90s and 2000s and so forth, so like, I feel like it's just a norm, right, to think that way. And it's what's so interesting about, kind of like your direction is that you decide to go the route of inspiration and impact, right?
Right.
Like, and we're obviously in that same boat too, because I think a lot of students who are in, jurisdictions and areas where they typically don't have the connection to a mom or a dad or an aunt or an uncle or a family member or a friend that's surrounding them, right? That are in high growth industries, that are in that understand the economies and understand how to navigate it and escalate their family mobility and all these systems, right? Don't come from necessarily immigrant backgrounds, or come from immigrant backgrounds, or doing well or whatnot. Our communities and populations are typically don't understand what putting it all together means, right? Got to do something that you love. You do something that hopefully that you are strong at, what the world needs, well, you can get paid for it too, but not just totally about getting paid, right? Because that eventually goes down a path of potential darkness, right?
Yeah.
I would assume.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I tell my students is who don't kind of come with who don't have sort of a strong family background, is I tell them, like, you're hustling is just a part of life. Like, you're going to hustle, no matter what you're doing. You got to hustle in school to learn. It's never ending. Even in your job, you're going to have to hustle. There are things, deadlines, stresses that are going to come with the job that you're doing. But you should always kind of do what feels right to you. And if you're going to make money regardless of whatever you do, as long as you're passionate about something, whether you're passionate about music or you're passionate about helping other people, and the industry that you're going into doesn't necessarily make a ton of money, that you're eventually going to make money. It's going to happen as long as you're hustling and you're putting yourself out there and making the right connections with a lot of people. People are going to find a use for the service that you're providing.
I think that's where, and Tim, feel free to join in at any point, man. You're part of the conversation there. So I think where I flipped my switch, right, of saying, maybe because eventually there's some kind of philosophical thing going on in your brain, right? I know, at least in Tim's brain, but like
a lot of philosophical things.
But in my brain too, when I was young, I was thinking like, is the plan to make a lot of money and that's it, or is the plan to do something that I really love, that I think I'm good at, so that I will like it first a lot, and then that will make money? Like I remember making that decision, right? And I decided to say, like, just thinking about it, right? Like it must be the latter, right? It must be, you have to really love it or be strong at it or capable of doing it in order to make the maximum amount of money. Because if you can't deliver maximum value, right, for people that you're serving, then you're not going to deliver. If you're not delivering maximum value, you're not delivering maximum money. You can't charge maximum dollars, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so that's what's interesting about your decision, is like, that was good. I guess that was good advice, right, from your family members.
Yeah, like from my friends and my professors and things like that. Even my parents. I come from an immigrant background, and my dad is a roofer, and in the mid 80s, early 90s, he worked for a company, and then somewhere like the mid 90s, like 93, 90, 94, 95 or somewhere around there, he decided to start his own company, and he's run it ever since. Like, he decided, like, I'm just going to do it myself and be my own boss and things like that. So the idea from the very beginning was that he will be the roofer, and then somewhere along the way, he was going to pass the business on to either me or one of my older brothers. And one of them decided to go into finance, and the other one stayed with the family business. And then me, I just decided to do music. But I think one of the most interesting things about it is that when you're from an immigrant background, and me being Mexican, and the idea is like, oh, you go to high school, then you start working. You don't necessarily go to college. My parents were very supportive. I was like, okay, go to college. And then once you're in college, do whatever you want to do. And that was a pretty rare thing in my family. And I think it's a pretty rare thing in some other first generation, immigrant families. It's like you make money as quickly as you possibly can. And when I was in college, it's just like one of those things where like my dad especially would start comparing us to some of my cousins who went into the family business where, oh yeah, your cousin Miguel, he just bought himself like a brand new truck, cash. I was like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm studying for an exam right now. I was like, oh, if you were in the business, you'd be able to buy yourself a brand new truck. You have a lady on your side right now. I was like, that's cool. I'm I'm studying for an exam here real quick. So it was that a lot of that growing up in college, my college years. But once I graduated and then my parents started realizing, my passion with like music, there's like they just kind of left it alone and they were very supportive of it. So when I told them that I wasn't going to law school anymore, that I was going to just do music instead, my mom, one of the first things my mom said to me was like, "Yeah, Gerardo, you've done everything that you've always set your mind to. So yeah, go do it."
Yeah. Wow. Ooh, moms. Shout out to moms.
Right.
So this is very interesting. My mom and dad, they own Chinese fast food restaurants, and they had like a restaurant what they owned in Chinatown in San Francisco. So I pretty much was raised in San Francisco in my early years. The rent was too high, and so they eventually closed that business, and they eventually started a Chinese fast food restaurant in San Leandro. And literally the same function, right? Like when your mom and dad are coming from a background where they are coming here to give you something better, so they don't care about, they need to produce some cash so they can establish a family. It makes so much sense that is where some people come from, right? Got to make money first, right?
Make it as quickly as possible.
Yes, and it doesn't matter whether you like it, doesn't matter where you love it. It just matters that you're producing money and you can do it, right? And you can build something from it, right? That's a very other interesting perspective. I think I agree with that model too, right? To some extent, because I've seen the value that of that thinking, right? And so I don't want to discount either, right?
Yeah.
Because they both balance each other out, And I think it's just we're so spoiled from the American dream, the remnants of the American dream. We're so spoiled by being an individualistic society, in America. We're so, in our own filth there. And I feel like sometimes people get lost. And sometimes it is about like money, right? Like get your finances together, right? Get your act together, get a family, have some babies, and go have like just go live life, right? In that way. So I'd like to talk about Notes for Notes now and what the organization is, and just go into a baseline of what it is, and then go into some of the project. But first, I'd like Tim to kind of kickstart us and saying, "Hey, what were your experiences like, Tim? Maybe you can give us a little warm up here."
Oh, it was tremendous. So, all right, I'm gonna start off with a story. So, when the first time I walked into the Boys and Girls Club, the beginning of the summer, I was walking in. I'm like, okay, cool. They have a music studio. So, like later on in the day, I had asked David if I can go to the music studio. He said, yeah, sure. So I walked in, saw this short guy named Gerardo. So I walked in. I showed him one of the beats I made during the school year, and then I made it on my iPad. So he's like, "You made this with GarageBand?" And I said, "Yeah." And then we took one of my poems, and then like we made a song out of it. And I can't sing, so it was god awful, but it was fun because he taught me how to use Ableton. He taught me a few scales on the piano, and like there was guitars, and he would play with them like when I was first learning guitar. And it's just a great space to learn.
Excellent. Yeah. And you're from San Francisco, right? And that's where the Boys and Girls Club was at, San Francisco?
Yeah, well, the new one, because I had played basketball for the Boys and Girls Club, but it when I was in third grade, but then it was at a different location and didn't have Notes for Notes then.
And what do you feel like you got? Like, how has Notes for Notes, empowered you? How has Notes for Notes, ingrained into you? Like, what piece of Notes for Notes do you feel like is the key, for you?
I think it was try new things, because Gerardo was always pushing me to try like new beats or try new patterns or try different tempo or try that instrument, try this instrument, put it all together and just work hard at it and keep adding to it until it's perfect.
Cool. And if people don't know, Tim came a little down the line, but he's a alumni of our 2020 Interns, Fellows, and Entrepreneurship program in 2020, and also Tim is taking a role on our team as well. So glad to have you, Tim. So Gerardo, let's get into Notes for Notes. Give us a baseline.
Yes.
And what is the services? What do you guys do over there?
Yes. So Notes for Notes started in Santa Barbara back in 2006. And it was basically a brainchild of musicians who wanted to help. And it started off at like a community center in Santa Barbara. And they had like a little room that they would go into, that youth can go into. And it would have just kind of like your basic little setup where you had your audio interface, you had a computer, and you had a mic. And you would go in there and you would either create music or you would learn an instrument depending on, which program director was working that day. And Notes for Notes just kind of grew from there into from like a little spot at a community center in Santa Barbara to over 20 studios around the country, like legitimate recording studios that you would normally see in some of these high-end recording studios. Our flagship studio is in Nashville, and it is huge. It is massive. I'm talking about a huge board. Any professional artist who would go in there would be, all right, this is not a kid's place. This is like a legit professional recording studio. So we go from a little closet in Santa Barbara to some massive 20 studios and all over the country. But we originally, pre-COVID, we were sort of like an after-school program where youth can come in, they would record music, create music, learn depending on what studio you're into, because every studio sort of has its own culture based off of who's ever running it. Like my studio, for example, in San Francisco, we're really high on performance. We're really high on creating music, recording, things like that. Like that's the culture in my studio. But if you go to, like, take for example St. Paul, where they have another studio, they're really, really big on music production, creating their own beats, creating their own sample packs and things like that. If you go to New York and one of our studios in there, they're really, really 100% based on that music performance. Yeah, so every studio is going to be different, but the goal is to just have youth come into a safe place where they can create anything that they want, anything that they can possibly imagine. They can do it in our studios, and we give them the tools, the resources, and the know-how to just be like, all right, here's your foundation. We'll teach you the foundation part, and then from there you can start creating your own thing, your own sound, and sort of find inspiration anywhere, which is one reason why we surround our studios are surrounded with musical instruments, guitars, ukuleles, pianos, and things like that, just because we want the youth to just kind of look anywhere in the room, be like, all right, that inspires me right there. I want to use that sound for this track.
It's such a I had a clothing brand that's as close as I get to a studio. where there's music and stuff. Interestingly enough, I actually didn't really listen to like music. Like I wasn't like a music collector,
Mhm.
like I never like searched for music,
Yeah.
but I like music. So when I know a note when I hear it, right?
Yeah.
But I just want to give you that little tidbit. I actually don't really listen to music like
Yeah.
intentionally. It's interesting. Um, but I had a clothing brand. I had a studio and a design studio. I just love the idea of like, it sounds like an inspirational space,
Yeah.
right? Where people can get like come like it sounds like a place where Tim and his friends and the people that go there now can look forward to coming there,
Oh,
right?
I was in there all day.
He was
I
in there
would
all day.
assume. I would assume like
Yeah.
if you have access to all these tools where you can produce creativity, like that's such an exciting space to be in. My curiosity is, how did Nashville become the flagship?
I
To
have
start in Santa Barbara.
I think that was just kind of like the first place, the first Boys and Girls Club that
Mhm.
decided that, all right, we're gonna take a chance on this place.
Got it. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Basically, so there's a group of it sounds like it was a group of folks who wanted to start this, who started up Notes for Notes,
Yep.
right?
Mhm.
How many people? Was it like a small group? Was it a group of
It was
friends? Was it,
it was a small group. I think it was like maybe a group of 2 or 3 people
okay.
who just started it. Yeah, and they just decided like they're gonna take a chance on it and do it. They got the funding, and then all of a sudden they just started expanding.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
and was there like a core pitch or a core value or core unique value, core like innovation or something? What was the thing that allowed them to just kind of blow up, and go to these 26 different sites and produce these studios? Like, was there an approach that Notes for Notes had?
I think the approach was let's let's bring a new twist to music because music from when I was growing up was a very academic thing. And not everyone has access to that. Like I grew up being able to take private music lessons, and I was also able, and I grew up uh, learning sort of like the academic side of music theory, music composition, and things like that. But unfortunately, not every school district and not every child has access to that type of musical training. So Notes for Notes just kind of took this contemporary musical equipment and programs and decided like we're going to teach music on a different level, on a level that is accessible to everybody, regardless of what tools that they have in front of them.
Mm,
Because again, not everyone can read musical notation, not everyone can read musical rhythms and things like that, or learn the academic things of music, but everyone has sort of access to their hands and their vocal cords, and
mhm.
they can just kind of learn just doing music that way. Because music isn't regulated to like relegated to being in a classroom. It's open to anybody and everybody.
Yeah, when we start thinking about like, oh, to be a musician you have to have all this all these things, to qualify, but really at the end of the day we're all musicians
Yep.
and we're
Everyone has a
all
heart.
sound engineers. We're
Mhm.
all interested in communication. We're all interested in sharing and expression. We're all interested in sharing what we feel, how we feel, and what it means, and how it relates to other people, right? Through all
Yep.
forms of communication, right? Creative communication, I would say, right?
Yep. Like you have your clothing brand that communicate an idea of like who you were or who you are as an artist, and you have Tim and we communicate using music or even music production, the backside of the part that no one ever sees, making that music
Yeah.
sound good.
We spent hours
Uh,
doing that.
Yep.
so I'm gonna take the opportunity to go to the restroom for a little bit,
Yeah.
because I have to go to the restroom. But Tim is a great host, and I'd like to have Tim maybe share a bit in the meantime on why do you like musically expressing yourself, and then also why do you have interest in podcasting, Tim? I'd like for you to answer that towards the latter part of that. So I'll let you do a little ramble for a little bit.
Okay. All right. So where I got started in music was, I think, third. When do you start playing the recorder? Probably like third or second
Probably like
grade.
around second or third grade. Yeah, somewhere around there.
So we started playing the recorder in class, and I hated it. I absolutely hated it.
Dude, everybody hates the recorder. I hated the recorder when I was learning it.
So I saw the older kids, like the fourth, fifth, and fifth graders playing the violin. I'm like, bro, that's cool. Over here, like Beethoven. So I'm like, I want to play the violin. Wait, no, I'm lying. It started when I was in, I want to say first, second grade. And my YMCA group leader, she did tap dancing, but she loved Beethoven. So in like when we're doing our homework, she would always put Beethoven on. And I'll be acting like I could play the piano on the table to Beethoven. So I'm like, bro, that's cool. So then once I got the opportunity to play the violin, I'm like, yes, I want to do that. So then I had asked, then when it came to signups, I was the first person to sign up for violin. So I had the music teacher, Miss D. Kimura. We would all go in a group and practice violin. But that was in fourth grade. But towards fifth grade, I'm a Star Wars kid. I love Star Wars. So I had asked her, hey, Miss D. Kimura, can I play the Star Wars theme song instead of the normal stuff? She said, yes, of course. So then I started practicing the violin every single day for 2 hours when I got home and during the school time when I was finished with my homework. And on Tuesdays and Thursdays, she'd bring me out of class to go practice it. So I kept on practicing and practicing, practicing. And then when it came time to do it in front of the school, I did it. I'm like, okay, I think I can do this. So then push came to shove. I think sixth grade, I was in the orchestra. But then I didn't like the teacher because he made me do cello and I wanted to do violin. So I'm like, bro, I purposely had to get out of orchestra because I couldn't do cello. I like the cello sounds, but then I don't like playing cello. So I had went to a different elective. So after that, we had iPads because our school gave us iPads for the year. So then they had GarageBand. So I'm like, okay. So that I think in seventh grade, I had asked the new music teacher, could I use one of the violins to record something? So then he said, yeah, sure. So then I just made a simple dun, 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 dun. And then I had added that to the beat I showed you the first time that we met. So after that, I used to dance. Like I loved James Brown. So during the school time, man, I was listening to James Brown, trying to do his dance moves. So then after I signed up for the dance club. So I was the best dancer in dance club. Not trying to brag, but I was. So
That's a big statement, man.
Right.
I was.
I'm a good dancer. Trust me, right? Like that's a big.
I'll send you the video. So we had done it, and I always wanted to play the guitar. So I had asked my three favorite staff. So I had my teacher, Mr. David Watson, I think it was Mr. Robert, and then our janitor, Bob. So I had asked them, I think it's Bob. I'm not sure. I think it was like 2 years ago. 3, actually. So I had asked them if they can My Famous Flames for the performance, and they said, yeah. So me and the music teacher, Ms. Bowman, had taught them how to dance like the Famous Flames in the video while I was James Brown. So as they were doing that, I was teaching them. And then after the performance, Mr. Robinson came to me. No, we had practiced downstairs in the basement of the school. It was so creepy. I didn't like being down there. It's like something like a horror movie. But down there, he had 2 guitars. And after I finished dancing, he gave me this guitar. he said, "Hey Tim, you can have this guitar for teaching me how to dance."
Wow.
And then after that, I've been playing guitar ever since, and I've been learning songs, scales, and I've been trying to do a Jimmy Page thing where I use the bow on the guitar.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, I remember when I was learning, I was in my I think I was in 6th, 7th grade. I realized that for me when it came to like music production, I realized that I liked creating music versus playing music. That's kind of like how I started. And what I used to do back in the day, like you had to pirate music software. So that's exactly what I would do. I would pirate music software, put a bunch of viruses on my PC, but it was worth it because I was able to like start learning how to create my own music. I didn't have any of the connections to hook up my piano to my computer, but what I would do is I would grab like a computer microphone and put it up to the speaker of my little Casio keyboard, and I would create music that way. And that's pretty much how I learned when back at that age. And it wasn't beats that I was creating. It was like orchestra music that I started writing. And just like the little sounds that they had on there, as terrible as that they are on those Casio keyboards, like the violin or the strings don't sound like strings. They kind of sound like, I don't know, like it's very computer sounding.
It's like synthesizers.
Yeah, just synthesizers. That's how I started my journey when it came to creating music. And I realized like I don't like performing. It's not my thing. I'll do it if I have to perform, but I like being in the background and creating my own little music and learning how to create separate tracks. Like I'll create a melody track and like, okay, now I can start writing the counter melody, and now I can start putting in drums and these little short 1 minute pieces of music. And I wish I still had them because those were like, being like, 12, 13 years old, just creating my own little music like that.
yeah, I love it. It's interesting because I still have the bootleg, Adobe Photoshop 5.5, right?
Yeah.
That Danny Wu burned for me, it's like right up there. But like that's what got me started on my journey on doing design, right? So it's just so interesting that I found that middle school is a really great time to absorb things that you don't really know that you love yet. Because you just gravitate towards doing it. You can geek out all day. And at some point you realize that that's actually kind of what you want to do in life, So thanks for sharing your stories. I'd like to swap into the conversation about podcasting. And we're obviously in one right now ish. We still need to set up some of our infrastructure, but we're there. We're talking. So Tim, when do you have to roll out? You got another class, right? In a little bit.
No, I have class today. I just got some work, but then they're not doing until 12 at night, so I can stay.
Great. So Notes for Notes, is a organization that has started in Santa Barbara, spawned these different studios across the country, and has I would assume typically engaged students in producing sounds and music for typically the typical what we've been talking about, music, right?
Yeah.
And as the world evolves, right, there's new priorities or new ideas or new types of sounds that can be engineered, not just necessarily music. Yep. And so podcasting has spawned up as a priority of sorts with the San Francisco branch of Notes for Notes at the Boys and Girls Club. So share the context on how that podcasting, right, is folding into the Notes for Notes org, on a local level, and just share more about the priorities around that first.
Yeah, sure. It really spawned from kind of what is happening now in the world. Like there's a lot of changes that have happened over the last 5-6 years when you're talking about things that have happened politically and things that have happened locally and things that have happened globally when it comes to like the pandemic. You've had the recent elections, you've had the right, the insurrection in DC, and all of these, like all these little things. And for me, it was just like, well, we're getting these perspectives from adults, but we don't get the perspective from youth, and we never talk about them, like as if this doesn't affect them. And it started becoming a thing for me. I was like, I want to sort of start talking to the youth that have been going through all of this, because Tim isn't blind to what's going on in the world, and neither are any of the other youth. They see it. They watch the news. They hear their families talking about it. They hear the chit chat, and kids are sponges. Whatever they hear, they retain that, and they create their own sort of why and their own ideas around the surrounding things that are happening. So it's just like, all right, let's get these conversations going, because I would have these conversations with some of the youth without the mic in front of them. Like, hey, how you feeling? What's going on with you? Tell me what's going on. And they would be like, oh, blah, 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 and then I realized, like, all right, I want to hear your story now. Tell me what's going on with you. But I'm going to put a mic in front of your face. I'm going to ask as many questions as I possibly can. And hopefully 1 hour of talking with you will produce 15 minutes worth of content. And once you get that mic in front of them, and once you ask the right questions, they're like, you realize, yeah, youth are very complex people, and they're not as one dimensional as some adults think. Like, they're not, they may have social media like TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter, but they are more than just that. Like, youth are way more than just the social media that we assume that they consume. They are very aware of what's going on in the world. And yes, it's been pretty interesting to hear some of the stories that come out and how they feel. And recently I had a conversation with some of the teens, and asking about sort of like the mental health during all of this, because they no longer have the interactions that they had before in school. They were able to see their friends on a daily basis. They were able to confide in them. But now that they don't have that anymore, they don't have that face-to-face interaction, they realize like, yeah, ever since COVID happened and I don't have my friends anymore to see, they start to wonder, is like, were they really my friends, or were they just school friends? And who can I confide into now that I don't have, my schoolyard chums to be able to talk to? And it's a very lonely thing for them now. Like, COVID has made them extremely lonely, that they miss being able to go out and interact with people. It's just like, I'm just stuck in a room in front of a computer for 8 hours a day. This is it.
So you're saying that having conversations about people's stories intentionally, right, has been a form of relief for the young people that you've been working with. And I'm assuming you've also been like starting podcasting with your students on site already, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. A lot of it's done virtually with the teens, but with the middle schoolers, it's been on site. They go in there, we set up the microphones and everything, and we just converse.
So that's I think that's what's so interesting, is that when we think about podcast, when podcasting gets stripped down to its kind of nitty gritties, it seems like at the end of the day, it's people being themselves, talking with each other about something, an idea that they typically care about. That's what it is. That's basically what it is, right?
It's just a conversation, as if you're out having coffee with somebody. You're just having a conversation with somebody.
And you might be out on having some coffee with some people, talking about something that you care about. You may be playing some music on the side. You may be, go to a bathroom break. You may, there could be anything that happens in a podcast, because essentially it's just life happening, but you're just recording it, and hopefully people it spawns, I guess the idea is that we're recording it so that people can watch it and listen to it and be inspired by the ideas that other people are having, right? Or or what people are sharing.
And it's there's a lot of prep to it though. Like, is it just a conversation? Like, it's a conversation, but it's a steered conversation.
Yep.
And there's a lot of stuff that does go in the background. Even though I'm conversing with some of these youth on, what is life, what's life like, post COVID. What was your life like pre-COVID? How are you feeling mentally? There's a lot of prep that you have to do in terms of what are appropriate questions that you can ask them, and what are some, how can you steer the conversation based off the person that you are talking to? Like, some youth are can stay on topic the entire time, and you don't really necessarily have to steer the conversation. Sometimes they can steer the conversation in certain area, in a direction that feels comfortable to them. But then there are certain youth where you have to sort of get them to open up with the right questions, because sometimes a youth can just give you a one word answer, yes, no, maybe, I don't know. But being able to like dive further deeper by asking more and more questions and getting them to open up, that's something that you have to prepare for. Like, it's even though it's just a conversation, it is a prepared and steered conversation. And a lot of it, and if you do tend to like run into one of those who just kind of give you the one worded answer or don't want to really go into specifics, it's up to the host to just sort of, all right, now I have to steer the conversation and keep asking more and more questions just so that I get more information out of this person.
Yeah. And I would assume that students podcasting with each other without anyone that's within their +2 years, plus or minus 2 years of age, would probably be the most effective way, with a strong host still leading, right? A strong like student host still leading, I would assume.
Right. No, yeah. And one of the things that I do with the podcast, even before we even start recording, is just going through the art of conversation, because conversing face to face with somebody is a scary thing for a lot of youth. Because again, even though we grew up in the early 90s, 2000s, where we didn't have a cell phone or a social media to communicate with people, face-to-face conversations was something that we had to do.
I was still scared, man.
I was still scared. Yeah. But nowadays, like, more youth have the ability to be behind their phones or be behind a keyboard and talk, versus having to go up to somebody face to face. Like, I remember being in high school, if I wanted to talk to like a girl that I liked, I couldn't just
Jesus Christ
text her. I had to go up to her and try to start a conversation. And that's something that I think is a little brand new for a lot of the youth, because face-to-face conversations, again, it can be pretty scary. And finding the courage to go up to somebody and be like, hey, how are you, is kind of hard. But that's one of the things.
It makes it a lot easier.
Yeah. So social media makes it way easier. But the art of conversing is something that I always teach first when it comes to podcasting.
Man, I had like zero confidence to go up to a girl, and not until like college, literally, like to just be able to ask someone out, like, and I feel like I was always kind of a scared kid because I was bullied when I was in middle school, and I was like kind of a chubby kid in middle school too. So like I lost all this confidence, and then I stretched out and stuff in high school. But I feel like just what we're talking about is such a lost, it is like a lost art, right? And it's such an interesting dynamic to add this kind of project that we're asking for students, like, hey, talk to each other and record it, and talk about whatever you'd like to talk about with your friends or with yourself or with a partner or whatnot, right?
Yep.
And just go into it and have fun and basically have fun, right?
Right. And it's a lot of work. Like, no, like everyone thinks it's just sit in front of a mic and just start talking, but there's just so much work that goes behind it that I think a
So,
lot of people aren't aware.
so let's go behind the scenes now, right? So there's the art of conversation itself, right? Which is an entire topic of conversation.
Yeah.
But then there's also the back end part, right? So give us kind of a layout, right? Of from the notes for notes perspective on starting the podcast, right? Your approach. What do you have to set up? What are all the pieces? What does
Right.
everyone have to prepare from the art of conversation to the technology to the questions to what's the outline of the prep doc?
Yeah. So basically, first you start off with the art of conversation, like learning how to converse, learning how to breathe is an important thing. Knowing how to project your voice, knowing how to listen is a super important thing that a lot of people need to learn how to do. Even adults need to learn how to listen because we're always everyone is prepared to uh, listen to respond versus listening to understand. And teaching youth, okay, give yourself some time to really absorb to what the person is saying, and how do you make sure that the person that you're talking to know that you are, that you're paying attention to what they're saying. And it's like, how do you do that? Well, you repeat back what they say. Like you repeat it back to them so that they know, that person knows that, okay, this person heard me. Don't be quick to jump into the conversation. Like if after someone says their piece, wait a second and then start jumping in. There's like little things that people need to learn how to do. And it's a practice. Like we practice these type of things before a podcast even starts. And we do little topics that we don't record. For example, one of the things that we did recently was we talked about ghosts, and we talked about
Conspiracy theories.
conspiracy theories. Yeah,
Bro, that's a podcast I need to be on. Derek
we just
knows.
we just talk about so many different like little things, so that we get used to not jumping in, and we get used to really listening to understand, and we get used to preparing and writing down questions. So like those are like the little things that we start working on, and we get used to breathing properly, because if you don't breathe properly, then you're going to sound nervous and labored. Exactly. Learning how to relax. So there's like these little things that's just the art of conversation, and that's like it's whole different. That can take 1, 2, 3 weeks to just get used to, and then once
Or a
that's done,
lifetime.
or a lifetime, yeah, you never stop learning. It's I'm still learning how to do it, and yeah, it's just an ongoing process. And then next is just sort of, how do you start to prepare the questions, and that you go into researching in that. And researching is always dependent on whatever the topic is and who you're talking to. Research the person that you're talking to. Who is this person? What kind of, have they done podcasts before? Have you, what's your relationship with this person? Do you know whether or not, if you're going to have to steer this conversation, or are they going to steer the conversation? You have to sort of prepare for the person that you're talking to, and then prepare those questions, and then start thinking about, all right, if this person gives me, a 1-sentence answer, what is going to be question A, B, and C to get more information out of that? Like you start having to mentally prepare, and then also writing down, questions, that you want to ask them. So that's the back end stuff. And then you have to do the research yourself. If you're talking about conspiracy theories, start researching these conspiracy theories. Go down that
Alex
rabbit hole.
Jones.
Go down that rabbit hole, and figure out, all right, if you're talking about QAnon, well, how did QAnon start? Start researching the conspiracy theories that they subscribe to, and then start doing research on those conspiracy theories, and just go all the way down into that rabbit hole, so that when that podcast comes, you have all this information that you can kind of, pick from on a whim. And after that, When it comes to the equipment, it really depends. You don't need anything fancy to record a podcast. You don't need, an expensive microphone. You don't need expect an expensive software or anything like that. Whatever, you can use your phone to record a podcast. You can use any type of recording device that you have to record a podcast, and it's going to work. Like, there's nothing fancy about it. Like, the recording part is like the easiest part. It is the prep that is the hardest part of a podcast, and there's just so much of it that you have to do, and just for an hour conversation that can only turn into 15 minutes worth of content.
Well, first of all, it's too late to buy an expensive microphone. I already did it. And then I think also curiosity, I think, is one of the major factors, right? Like, like, what do you care enough about to be curious about it to discover, I would assume, right? As well.
Yeah.
So so when you say prep, you're really talking about like prepping for the conversation.
Yep. You're prepping for the conversation. There's a lot of research that has to go behind the conversations, because you don't want to BS it, Yeah. The audience that is listening to you, they're either listening to you because they want to learn something, or they're listening to you because they have the same interests that you have. And one of the things that I always tell my students that I teach podcasting to is do as much research as you can, because who's ever listening to you is going to learn something from you, and you never want to give them any type of misinformation at all. Like, podcasting is supposed to be on one side an educational type of conversation that you're having with somebody. And you have to be really, really careful in what you say, because clearly if you're not careful about what you're talking about, you have things that spring up. Like, for example, you have QAnon that all of a sudden springs up, and Alex Jones, who like to prescribe to these sort of conspiracy theories and things like that. So I always tell them to be careful.
Because it is a public, you're putting something out into the ether, right? Yeah. And anyone can watch it, anyone can reference it, anyone can hold it against you, anyone can, like, it becomes this thing where, like, it's you, your identity and what you believe in put out into the world, and it's what you believe, right, or it's what you said, right? And so it's really just for self-preservation purposes, of being, you don't want to be someone that you're not, on there, that or you don't want to put out stuff that's going to get you in trouble too, right? Like with our employers having potty mouths, like that's something that we've been trying to figure out, like, here and there.
Exactly. You don't want to, run for office in 15 years, for example. Like, all of a sudden you want to be the mayor of some city, and then someone pulls up this podcast of you saying 9/11 wasn't real or something like that. You don't want that to happen. So you definitely have to be extremely careful about what you say, and making sure that what you're talking about is well researched. So there's a lot of stuff.
So you're saying record with whatever you got, right? Whether it's a Zoom to a YouTube, whether it's on your phone, on the audio recording function, collect it with whatever you've got in front of you, right? And maybe you can kind of just dive into some of the tools that you would recommend. And then when it comes to being done with recording it, what is the post-processing like?
Right. So record with it whatever you want. If you have sort of like the funds to buy a nice microphone, by all means do it. Buy a nice microphone, USB microphone, if you can get one. Those tend to run between $30 all the way up to $100. Plugs directly into a computer, and it works just fine. Like, you can get a really good sound out of just a USB microphone. You can use a headset with a mic on it. That would work just fine as well. When it comes to software, you can pretty much use anything. If you have a Mac, if you have GarageBand, for example, that's a really good tool to use to cut audio. There is an app called Audacity, and that is 100% free to use. It's great for audio recording. Here at Notes for Notes, we use a web-based audio program called Soundtrap. And what's great about Soundtrap is it is web-based, and they have their own application on the iStore. And you can pretty much record audio on Soundtrap directly. And not only that, you can actually podcast directly onto Soundtrap. So if we're having this conversation one-on-one, I could call you on using the Soundtrap web-based application or on the phone, and we could see each other face to face as if we were on a Zoom call, and the audio would be recording.
Does it record video?
It records video. I think no, it doesn't record video. It only records audio. Okay. But yeah, like it's a really, really useful tool to have. And it's 100% free to use.
And you're also going to be asking students to use Soundtrap as a main tool, right, for the podcasting if they would like to, right?
Yeah, exactly. Really, it's safe. It's COPA compliant. So, it's free.
All right. That's cool. So what we're asking students to do is produce, host, right? Mm-hmm. And promote a podcast series, right? On a topic of interest to you or passion interest to you, right? Your guests perhaps as well, and your audience, right? Through a live or recorded conversation, right? Or performance, right? Or some form of journalism or reporting or some kind of sharing of information, right? That's what we're asking students to do, right?
It's fun.
It's fun. Yeah. Do what you basically want to talk about or perform or share, basically, right? And do it with yourself and put it out there on, like how we're doing on YouTube, do it on Soundtrap and record it. And then, we'll get into specifics of how it can maybe perhaps get into, other platforms like a Spotify or Apple Podcast. I would assume you just have some understanding of how to get down that road, right? Yeah. And I guess the number one thing is really just like, what's it about, or maybe it's about nothing, right? But it's entertaining, right? Yeah. Maybe it's comedic, maybe it's something that you're just riffing on, right?
Yeah.
I guess the question is like really like asking them why, right? Share a topic, do something on there, right? That's entertaining or or therapeutic for you, I guess. But then ask yourself why you're doing it, so that why you're driven on this kind of the information that you're sharing in the podcast, right? Yeah. So I guess when you hear this produce, host, promote a podcast series on topic of passion to you, your guests and audience through live or recorded conversation, performance, or journalism, how do you want to break that down, Gerardo? Like, what's your recommendations there? What's your first approach there?
My first approach is find a topic that you're pretty knowledgeable on already. Find something that you're, again, like you said, that you're passionate about. And it could be absolutely anything. If you geek out on Marvel and you want to talk about the latest episodes of WandaVision and what you think, talk about that and find other people who have the same interests as you. And even if you don't have someone that you can interview or talk to about it, you can have the conversation yourself and talk about what you think is going to happen next, or how it's going to tie into the multiverse and Spider-Man and Doctor Strange. If that's what you're passionate about, by all means, just do that. Like you could, and just find something that you're passionate about and talk about that first, and see how it feels, and just start building off of that and promote it. I think that's the one thing that we need to talk about is promotion. It's how do you get your content out there? And one of the biggest questions that I get from youth who create music is I've created this song, but I don't know how to get it out into the world. Like, what do I do? What platform should I put it on? And how should I promote this on my social medias? And I always tell them, well, I show them different things, like DistroKid is a great way to get your stuff out there. They will post your music or your podcast Apple Music or Spotify, or you can do SoundCloud and put your stuff on there and start promoting it on every social media app, every single one of them. And I tell them, well, how do I do that? I'm like, well, find little snippets of the song that you like and start, sharing those little snippets. A 30-second, post your chorus up on TikTok and on Instagram and tag it and just do that a lot, 3 to 4 times a day. I guarantee you that people are going to listen to it.
And find your where do you have groups of people who are following you, right? Whether it's 2 people or whether it's, one person or whether it's 100 or 1,000 or 5,000, right? Like just map out that list of where you have groups of people and start at those places, right? As a start. And I guess when it comes to topics, like you mentioned, like maybe you're a movie guru, right? You're talking about movies. Maybe you're into movies and you're into Marvel specifically, and then another topic on this side, but you're starting with this and then you're going to that, right?
Yep.
For me, I'm interested in smart cities, and I like talking to people about digital infrastructure, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe someone wants to talk about, the gender equity gap. Someone wants to talk about Black Lives Matter. Maybe someone wants to talk about, conspiracy theories. Maybe people want to talk about, how education, isn't serving them, and that they want to create a new version of that. Maybe
that's
they
Mr.
want
Ebner.
That's definitely Mr. Ebner. We should Mr. Ebner should definitely start a podcast. I think
but it will be too long. It would be way too long. It would be like 3 hours for one episode.
That's just like Joe Rogan, right?
That's what I would say, like inspiration. Like, what can kids draw for inspiration like I did? Because I kind of drew from Joey Diaz, The Church of What's Happening Now, Joe Rogan, Tiger Belly, Bad Friends.
Yeah. It could be, I mean, what's so interesting about podcasting is that it really doesn't matter what it is, right?
Yeah, it really doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter what you're doing on there, as long as you care about it and you want to record it and you want to share it, right? Mm-hmm. That's all that really matters.
Yeah, there's one guy I listened to. His name is a comedian named Bill Burr, mm-hmm. and he recorded a podcast on just parking in major cities. He just went on this long rant about parking, and I was just like, okay, but it was interesting because he was so passionate about it, but it made absolutely no sense. It was like there was no rhyme or reason for it. He went to go park in LA, and then all of a sudden he's like, what's going on with all the parking in these cities? And he just went on a giant rant.
For your frustrations, your passions, your depressive, insights, you know what I mean? Like, I think that's why this is such a fun project in our program, right? And it's such a fun employer in our program, is because it really gives the creative outlet for students to express themselves, create a brand for themselves, create a platform for themselves, create a way to communicate their ideas for themselves, allow them to exercise their muscle, right? Mm-hmm. Around conversing and being able to think ideas, to understand ideas, to connect with other people that may have interest in the same ideas, right? It's really up to your complete creative freedom. And I think also every student has something that they definitely know what they want to podcast about already.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, it's also very simple to identify what you care about enough to talk about, on a recorded function and to share with people. Would you say, is that what you find? When you talk?
Yeah. A lot of especially the younger kids, like middle schoolers, they're really into politics, and it blows my mind. They're really into politics, but it's when I talk to the high schoolers, they're into very other like materialistic things. Like I like some of them like talking about shoes and clothing and relationships. So it's just kind of like, you would think that it would be the other way around, but no, it's like the middle schoolers are really political based, and then high schoolers are just like, I'm very into what's currently around me right now in this small sphere of mine.
Yeah, and this is, I think, the dilemma of ages. Like high school students are just about their social life, and middle schools are probably still stuck under the wing of their mom and dad, so they talk
Right.
about, I don't know, something like that. And so I think a part of this too is to be able to explore, right?
Yeah.
Start with a particular thing that you care about, or that or that you think about a lot, right? And then just have that in a function, and then a recorded function, and then allow yourself to invite people to expand your ideas, and it's an exploration journey,
It
right?
is. Yeah. It's an exploration journey. It's a networking journey,
Mm-hmm.
because you realize, like, when it comes to podcasting, it's not just you, it's a team of people who have to put this all together. And when it comes to the branding part, you start to realize, like, wait, maybe I'm not that great at branding. And you need somebody who is really good at branding and being able to get your stuff out there, or being able to promote you, or maybe you want a specific type of logo that goes with your brand and who you are, but you don't know how to draw. So you find somebody who knows how to draw, who knows how to do digital art. You put that all together, and it's like, all right, then now I have my artist, I have my team, I have me, the host, my artist, my social media guru, and now we have this little small team to start putting out this content.
And say you don't have any of those people,
Yeah.
right? So how do you do it yourself as a start?
As a
what
start,
what do you prioritize?
I always prioritize the conversation first.
Yeah.
The conversation always comes first. Everything else will come second and fall into place. You'll start to learn how to brand and how to get your content out there. And you'll have different resources to use. One of the things that I always tell youth is, if we're going to start branding yourself, what's your image? Like, what are you trying to, what about you are you trying to promote? I'm a gamer. I love playing video games. And on my brand, on my channel, on Twitch, I promote a very not what we call, I'm not a sweat, where I'm not very good at gaming, but what I like to promote is sort of like the average non-competitive gamer
Yeah.
who tries his best.
That's me too.
So, like, and you start to think about, like, what is my image? Like, all right, now that I have, like, this is what I'm going to show to people, how else do I brand myself? Like, what else can I do to make me more interactive with my audience and people outside of that? Well, I'm going to start clipping not my best moments in gaming, but sort of like the real part of what it's like being a gamer. Like, oh, the frustration part of, throwing your headset on the desk after you've given up on a fight, or the mistakes that you make. Like, oops, I ran into the opposite direction when I was supposed to be helping my teammates. I ran away versus, like, helping, those type of things. And then I was like, all right, so now that I have, like, that's the thing, that's the content I'm going to put up on my social medias. Now, how can I make myself more accessible to people? And that's like, all right, now I'm going to create my own merchandise.
Mm-hmm. Is that what you did?
That's exactly what I did.
Nice.
So it was this long process, like, of trying to brand myself of who I was going to be as a gamer and as a Twitch streamer. And I'm wearing my logo right now. It's just an owl.
Stand up real quick.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Just the hoodie. Yeah.
You drew that too?
No, I found somebody who can do it. I had a team. So I had a friend who made this for me, and then I liked it, so I put it on a shirt.
I like the owl as, like, the mascot.
Yeah, I always thought that, because owls look funny to me, and I wear big glasses, and owls are smart, but kind of, if you ever see like an owl in the wild, or you kind of see like goofy videos at what they do, they're like, yeah, you don't, they're supposed to be wise. They're like connected to being wise, but if you see them in the wild and you see like funny videos of owls, it's like, yeah, that's kind of like what I guess am.
I love it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna see you as an owl now. What about introverts? Okay, because there's this one employer that we have named Joe Rule. He's with Rock Hunter Animation. Beautiful. He makes beautiful mechanical animations, and that's his service, right?
Mhm.
And he had a podcast, right? For a little bit, where it was like the topic was like entrepreneurs for introverts, like podcasts, like as a podcast taught about introversion for entrepreneurs or whatever, right? So what would you recommend for those who are, they would say that they're not necessarily extroverted, like they're more like they got to charge their batteries, on, by themselves type of person. Any insights there for?
Yeah. Take your time. I feel like I'm a very introverted person myself. Like my social battery gets drained pretty quickly. Like if I go out, I went out this weekend to Muir Woods, and I was drained the entire weekend after that. Like it was like a 2-hour hike, but being surrounded by a bunch of people and having to converse with somebody was just like the most draining thing I had done all year since last year. And I was just like, I don't want to do this again for like another 2 weeks. Like, just leave me alone. But yeah, again, it's just take your time with it. Like, there's never any rush to force yourself to create any type of content. None.
Yes.
And if you feel like, one conversation was just kind of too much, recharge that social battery. Like, you can't force it. Like, people know. Again, I'm going back to my streaming. I stream 6 days a week, and I give myself a 1-day break. But I start streaming on a Tuesday. By Wednesday, I'm just like mentally drained, having to have these conversations with people that can't converse back.
But that's what's also interesting is that if you're saying you have some level of introversion and you're Twitch streaming, that means introverts are out in the ether putting themselves out there, right? Introverts need a brand too. Introverts need a network too. Introverts, it's not like just because you're introverted means that you can't do these things, right? In many regards, you're doing those things in a different way.
Yeah.
Right. Essentially.
Yeah, the great thing about what I do when it comes to streaming is just like I don't have to have. There's no one in front of me to have this conversation with. I'm literally just talking to myself.
Right.
And then there's people listening, and I could look at chat and I would just be like, oh, if someone asked a question, I would just answer that question, or just read back the conversation that everyone's having with each other. And that's just kind of the extent to it. Like it's just me by myself with people talking in a chat, in a chat room.
And that works for introverts.
That works for introverts. There's a lot of introverted people who stream because it's so easy for them.
Yeah.
They don't have to have a conversation with anybody. They're just conversing with themselves.
Yeah. So I've taken the 16personalities.com test. If you haven't taken it yet, take it. 16personalities.com. It's the Myers-Briggs model.
Yeah.
It's 10-minute, 20-minute assessment. It pops out your personality. It also tells you your percentage introvert extrovert. So supposedly I'm like 57% extroverted. Yeah. And then I'm 43% introvert, right? And so I feel like podcasting is great for you too, because it allows you to have because right now it's just Gerardo and Tim, right? It's not like we're not like in a huge group, like it's not, we're just talking about stuff that we care about, right? Yeah. So and that's what's driving the conversation, right? It's the thing that we care about, not something that we don't care about with a bunch of people that you may not care about, and then talking about things you may not care about, right? You're talking about only things that you want to design in, right? Based on your interests.
Right.
So I feel like it's like be bold with what you care about almost, right? And then just go ham on it. you know, and who cares about how you act or what you're saying or whatever. Well, not necessarily. I mean, care about that stuff, but just get better on it over time, so you're not pissing anyone off either. But you know, you're going in just with the heart and soul of who you are into it, so that you have energy.
That's why I always That's why I always say start off with a topic that you're passionate about, that you know already, and that you think about often. just do that, like, and it builds from there, and it builds from there. Love and another thing, like, when it comes to podcasting, it doesn't necessarily always have to be like a question and answer podcasting. There's two different types of podcasting. There is the question and answer podcasting, like sort of like what we're doing now with the interview. But then there's also the storytelling type of podcasting, where it can just be you in front of a microphone and you're talking about your experiences and answering your own questions and going deeper and deeper in yourself. And that's where the therapeutic stuff happens a lot. It's, let me tell my story from beginning to end. And a lot of people really, really like that. Or it can just be you and one other person, and you just talk about, like, all right, I have so-and-so here in the studio. Tell me about yourself. And you start asking them questions, and they start telling their story. And that's the fun part. That's also another thing. Like, if you're an introverted person, and you don't want to interview anybody, there's still that self-interview that you can do with yourself and tell your story.
Love it. So we have to wrap up because you have to create vlogs. And we're now like 42 minutes into your vlog making time. So I'm now concerned because you're limited on time. But I do want to ask Tim if he has any last particular insights or thoughts. Tim, I'm super excited. I really want to blow up this particular program, Gerardo and Tim, because I think that it'd be super cool if PilotCity people just all podcasted. and you know, we just all, like, you know, and not just students in the program, like under Notes for Notes, which is great because you guys are helping us kickstart that, right, Gerardo? But I feel like my internal, like, secret mission is to, like, make everyone in PilotCity kind of like an influencer, right? Like, and to have everyone start their own podcast, and everyone's like, you know, it's like a network of all these people talking about cool stuff about, you know, what's themselves, or it's about with other people about all these topics. I just feel like it's such a great form of creating culture. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I'm very excited about this. I'm very excited about that. I'm really glad that, Gerardo, that you're doing this with us, and we're Notes for Notes is an employer in our program, right? And we'll be flexible with you. I know that you've got more things stacked on top of your kind of mission, you know, tasks and so for the next year. But we'll make it easy, and we'll make it fun and interesting. Yeah. But Tim, any particular last insights on your front?
I think in podcasting, people need inspiration, or like examples of what to go to. So I think if we provide like some examples of podcasts, like, they can go to and like take certain things from.
Yeah. There's so many. Like, I don't want to just give them the ones that, like, I don't want to just give them like Tiger Belly and Joe Rogan, because I don't know if I want to. I don't want to, you know, Bill Burr. Like, it's all the comedians and their whole thing, right? But I don't know if I want to just tell them, hey, go to those, right? Because people may be interested in a bunch of other stuff, but you know how I got started with Tiger Belly because I like Bobby Lee because he's an Asian guy. I'm an Asian guy, and I thought he was a funny Asian guy that I thought is, you know, it's like not a lot of funny Asian guys, you know, out there that are hilarious like him. And so I had this affinity for him, right? And so I just picked it up, and I was like, and then I started with him, right? I started Tiger Belly. That's how I started podcasting, Tiger Belly, right? And then I just started listening to his conversations with people, and then I started watching other people's podcasts like Theo Vaughn and, you know, Joe Rogan, you know, all that stuff. That's how I started. That's all I haven't gone far because it's like a commitment, right? Yeah. But that's how I started. How'd you guys start your watching podcasts, you know, kind of story?
For me, it was comedians. And I used to do stand-up comedy like at open mics.
Really?
I
Yeah.
want to see that. I want to see
Dude,
that.
I would love to.
I used to do that. And the last one that I went to was down in SoCal. And I remember I went on a date and I was like, you know what? The best way to impress this girl is going to be doing an open mic. And I had done open mics before, right? I had done open mics before and I was like, all right, it's going to be easy. So that's the last time that I did it. And, but listening to podcasting and listening to comedians on their rants is what got me into it and got me into like wanting to do open mics and things like that. I was like, it's not that hard. They're basically doing their comedy show on a microphone right now. They're just being funny. So I was like, I can do the same thing. So that's kind of like where I started. And then I started listening to Alex Jones, not because I was interested in what Alex Jones was saying, but because I thought it was really funny to hear him talk and sort of get content from that so that I could start using it into open mics and things like that, start talking about conspiracy theories and things and talk about like, yo, Alex Jones is so weird and just kind of just throw that out there.
Right.
Because I know like he has a huge following. So I knew that people in the audience were going to be like, oh, I know who Alex Jones is. So I started doing that. That's what kind of like where my podcasting journey started, just by listening only for content for comedy.
Yeah. Tim?
Mine started kind of like Gerardo with the comedians going their rants about doing comedy and open mics. But mine really started with the Church of What's Happening Now with Joey Diaz. Like, it was so funny. I can't, when I'm doing work, I can't listen to that podcast because I'll be laughing so hard. And he'll go on rants about anything, food, people, comedy, but then he also goes into like serious topics like his drug use or family. Like, I'm like, bro, that's cool. I kind of want to talk about that. And then like I started looking at entrepreneurs and Robert Kiyosaki and Dan Pena. And I'm like, okay, what if I had like an entrepreneurial comedy podcast with like Dan Pena, Robert Kiyosaki, Debbie Acosta, Damon John, people like that. And like, that's one of my dreams in the future.
Let's do it, man. Let's do it. So thank you all for sharing stories on podcasting. I think that was a great end to that. This obviously was a good podcast because we went over. Usually the ones that go over are the ones that are good. But then I also be like, oh, gotta get more time for the employer to do the vlog. So we have to cut it off. But I enjoyed my time with you two. Thanks for sharing. And Gerardo, any last parting advice for students who are in the program watching this podcast before they start their projects? Any parting advice for them before they start their journeys on starting their podcast? Oh, you're muted.
Yeah. Have fun and think about what you're really interested in. That's you may be interested in things, but you may not be as interested in them as you think you are. So really start thinking about what you're interested in and what story you want to tell. That's it. Like what is your story? What are you trying to tell and what are you trying to express? And once you figure that out, then start building on that, research it.
Yeah, and what do you want to explore too?
Yeah, what do you want to explore?
Because you got to keep doing it. might run out of content.
Exactly.
All right. Well, thank you so much. They're gonna watch this. This is a required watch before they start their podcast, so this is gonna be very helpful. Thank you all for joining. Gerardo, we'll keep you here for a little bit. Tim, feel free to stick around behind the scenes.
All right. I say I have work to do, so I'll talk to y'all later.
All right, all.